So welcome everyone. We have a very, very special guest today. Her name is Susan Warner, and you could see her here. And I'll read just a little bit about her bio. I've just met her and so impressed. She has a lifetime of life experiences to share with us, and we can learn a lot from her. If you think I'm looking a little kooky with my headpiece on, as Bill thinks, it's because this is a piece of art. It's a Dia de los Muertes piece, and the whole tablescape that I'll go into for something else is when we do the tablescape tour. But it's all themed for our talk today with Susan, and it's how to respect those who have passed from this life into another life, because we're going to be talking about death. Susan is a coach and a motivational speaker whose mission is to help others regain happiness and fulfillment after suffering loss. She has a popular podcast, which is Susan is Suddenly Single, and she shares her ongoing journey with an audience of growing listeners. Susan has had a long and successful career advising and guiding students and their family as they navigate the college application process. But we're here today because she has written this fantastic book that just came out. It's called Never Say Never, Never Say Always. And we're going to explore her title and some of the contents of the book. So I say formally welcome, Susan, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers to you.
Thank you.
So just a little bit, give us, I wanted everyone to see, first of all, because on the tablescape itself, as Susan is talking, Bill's going to show you that I did set up here a place setting for Susan at the table, and I asked you for pictures of your husband Michael and your son David, both very handsome men.
Very handsome men.
Yes. And also what's predominant on the table is the color orange, which I found that both in Mexican culture and for Buddhist is a very important color. It's fiery and it connects us with our past ones. And the marigold, which is edible, but they believe that this flower is like a compass, and it leads us to our loved ones who have passed into the next life. So I thought that was a very meaningful way to pay homage to you and to your story.
How interesting.
Isn't it? I just think culture helps us a lot, where I think in our American culture, we don't have any way to prepare for it. I'm a certified death doula, but I've in my studies and research have come to understand that in America we don't really have a good way to mourn, to show grief. So when you started off this journey, tell us a little bit about the time in between when David passed and when your husband did, and then your journey to discovering about this.
Thank you. Yes. So to your point about that, I think that one of the major themes of my writing is that societally we don't handle mourning and death well, and that we sweep it under the carpet and we give it a secondary place in our psyche. And I think a really interesting interview with Howard Stern and Anderson Cooper was where Anderson has had a lot of podcasts and information on death and dying. His father and brother have died. And he said he's never really dealt with it. Now, here's a man in his 50s who has written about it, podcasted about it, feels he hasn't dealt with it. So I think that your point that societally we don't deal with this well is definitely true. I also think the point that, before I get into where my journey starts, that I think that when I started this journey, I thought that grief was very personal and everybody's grief is their own and they need to deal with it. I think in light of today's world, grief has become societal. And I think that's a really important point, that we need to learn how to grieve from the news, grieve from other nations, grieve from other people's plights, as well as our own losses.
I think that's true. And I think, it gets into a bigger discussion, but on a macro level, when people become more isolated, and I don't mean just because of the pandemic, but people maybe don't have religion as much, or, their sense of community, they're more isolated that way, is that we don't have the traditions to help us cope with grief. It's often said, it's not Queen Elizabeth, but you say if you can't grieve if you haven't loved. but you still need that support system to help you on that path.
Very, very true.
Yeah.
So, in an elevator type nutshell, my son David, one of the most wonderful, magnanimous children's sons people, at 32 years of age, on August 18th of 2017, took his life. David was a suicide. Life became too difficult for him to handle. He felt he was disappointing people, I believe, and that he wanted to make everybody else's life easier.
I
And
read that in your book and the galleys and so on. And in my studies, it says that suicide and even estrangement is ever more difficult even than a death, because those that are still here in this life, they feel guilty, like they could have done something or seen it. Did you feel any of that?
I did not, but my husband did.
Mm.
I did not. I think that that's an interesting point. I do think, though, in dealing with what I have dealt with and my daughter has dealt with, where 6 months after David's death, my husband was diagnosed with a virulent cancer. He was 8 weeks from diagnosis to death at 62. I think that we have often said that David made a choice. Some believe that suicide is not a choice, but David made a choice, and we have intellectualized that choice, that this was something that he needed to do, that my husband in his illness did not. So we have handled them very differently, my daughter and I, in our grief and expectations and growth out of it. But my husband did have guilt and felt that there was more he could do, and it was nothing that was more untrue than that. My husband was an extraordinary father. He took extraordinary care of both his children, especially my son. And the only thing that I can tell you is in their deaths 6 months apart, that through spirituality, I do believe the souls travel in pairs and that they are together. And that
I,
has helped me
I just
enormously.
loved the way you said that you really felt that he had to go and help David or be with David.
He
And
needed to protect his son, I believe.
yeah,
And although difficult for my daughter and I, as a parent, I could never, ever question what a parent needs to do and how deep that love was. So in my mind, Michael needed to go protect David, feeling that I would protect Elizabeth on this end.
I know it's such a beautiful thought too. I I mean, I love life so much that, and I love my father here. I have my pictures of him and my grandmother and my niece's husband who died very unexpectedly in his 40s from a brain leak. And you try to justify these things like in our own personal ways, like, things that people should never say, like they're in a better place or they're this.
Things people should never say.
Yeah. So, in the book, do you have guidance for people on how to help them cope with others who have suffered a loss like this?
I think that's what the mainstay of the book is about. It's about something that you said earlier, is that you want to live. I chose to live. I chose this consciously throughout some very, very deep mourning and deep loss. And I'm going to jump in, reluctant or excited, I'm going to jump back into life. And I think that that is a conscious choice that survivors need to make, is that they want to live and live it with the gusto, that you can carry these people that you lose forward with you. Don't move on, move forward.
I
Keep
know.
their imprint with you. These people that we've lost, be it a grandmother, a spouse, a friend, an animal, have all left us with a wonderful piece of them that makes us who we are. So if we carry them forward with us and remember who we are and where they fit into our lives like a puzzle, we can be very happy people.
Yeah, I think when people get lost in it so much and they forget that the people who have passed still want you to live your life. How can you say how it's changed your relationship with others, whether it's your daughter or your extended family or friends?
I think I'm a better person through this growth, through this journey. I think that I'm more empathetic. I think I am far less judgmental. And I think that I now know that I have to look myself in the mirror. Ultimately, what other people choose to do or how other people choose to live is their choice, not mine. And I can't effectuate what they do. I can only speak for myself. And being that person that wants to live better, live kinder, judge less, care more, has made me a better person. But I have seen it by example. My friends and family have been extraordinary to me. They've held me up. And in return, I am that person back to them. So I feel that by understanding that I choose to live, that I want to wake up happy, that I want to make choices. The one thing about experiencing loss, particularly as a widow, is that I'm thrown back into life to make choices again, which I didn't think I would have. Now, understandably, if you said to me, could you have everything back to the way it was? Of course I would, but we can't. So that's not even worth discussing. So I now get to see how another man loves me, touches me, cares about me, speaks to me. An opportunity I wouldn't have had if my husband and I walked into the elder sunset together. And again, one that I would trade back, but I can't. So I get new experiences and new takes on life that I wouldn't have had. So I look at this as life's choices and life's opportunities.
I mean,
And
life
that's, I
happens.
think, a positive way to look at moving forward.
Yeah, life happens. I mean, one thing that I did, and I love Anderson Cooper's podcast. I think he's wonderful about it. And one of the things that overlaps with my dual work is that you say the names of the people. I mean, I feel often that people like, oh, don't bring up that, or don't say, you know, David's name or Michael's
Correct.
name because it'll upset her. But I like talking about those who in my family that have passed on. I find it curious, don't you, that people
I
skirt.
absolutely agree with you 100%. I encourage stories about Michael and David. In fact, I just got a very long message from a coworker of my husband's when he was with R.H. Macy and Company that she just lost her partner, and she read the book, and she said that it was that she remembers my husband being extraordinarily handsome and kind and high integrity, and this book has helped her move through her grief. And that is wonderful. Whenever people mention Michael and David's names, I smile. I want to keep them alive in my memory. They're
Yes.
not here, but they can stay with me in story and in memory. And I think that it is vital to talk about those people that have passed and bring up the stories and think about how they would feel. My brother-in-law recently had a big birthday, my husband's brother, and we went out to dinner, and he went to pick up the check, and I took it. And I whispered in his ear, "This is from Michael." And he
Oh,
burst out in tears. And he said it was one of the most significant things that's happened to him this year
wow.
because we're keeping him with us. And I think that's really important. So I am in total agreement with you. Don't avoid it with people. Don't hush the name or not want to mention it or say, you know, I don't want to say this, but say it out loud. Let them revel in all of the wonderful things that they're holding dear to them to keep these people close to their hearts and their minds.
Yeah, we have so much to learn from them. I think also that they were so important and beneficial to us in this life. I mean, when you when you talk about you know, the book and what people will get from it, what will the I love that you also have an audio book for it, and there is Susan has been very gracious to all you who are watching, so you just have to tag us on social media and then we'll just draw your name, but you know, be sure to send us your questions. But what I wanted to know was what do they get from your book that maybe they don't get from Anderson or somebody else, you know, who has written about it? Because I start to see this more and more as a very topical issue. I don't know if
Good
it's.
question. I think relevance. I think the biggest thing is relevance is that I don't corner the market on grief and I don't corner the market on recovery. Everybody's grief is valid and everybody's grief is personal, and that you can move forward. And I stress that, not on, and live a really good life with these people imprinted on who you are. And you can be happy and you can love again and you can care again and you can laugh again. President Biden had a saying that I'll paraphrase, that the day that someone tells you a story about a loved one who's passed and you smile instead of cry is transformational. And it is. And I think that if you read my book, it's a positive book. It is not a book on getting lost in the depths of grief. It's about recovering from grief and living your best life, being your best person, growing, experiencing, living. choose to live, go for
Maybe
the.
this is like too deep, but what if somebody says, I'm not ready for that yet. I still need to, how long was it for you before you said, all right, that's, I can't be, because part of my opinion on grief too is that it has to be about the others, but initially it's very selfish. I mean, we want that person back in our lives, so we feel slighted. We're like, why me? Why did you take him from me?
Yes. So I have to say, in my history in this, I lost my mother at 18. So I have been primed to cope since I was a young girl.
Yeah.
I think I felt more of the why me when I was 18 than I do now.
Mhm.
I don't think that it's a grand master plan. I think we are human, and I think we are struck with disease, just like our pets are, just like a tree is. And I don't think that it's a personal affront when someone is taken. You can't look at it that way. You have to say, this was out of my control, but I can absorb everything I need to from that person and move ahead with it and move forward with it. How long did that take me?
Yeah.
As I said, I'm a survivor. I am one of those people that has learned to cope from an early age. When I wake up in the morning, I know I want to live. I know I want to live my best life.
Yeah.
So if someone is saying I'm not ready, I can't do it, then you feed into that. If that's what is going to be your healing process, I am not here to tell you, damn it, girl, get up. I'm
Yeah.
here to tell you that you must heal yourself. You must take care of yourself. My mother was a health education teacher. She had a saying in health education, walk it out, talk it out, think it out. Walk it out is to exercise, and which I am a firm believer in, get those endorphins going. Walk it out, talk it out was to speak to someone about it. Think it out is the obvious. And I think that those are mental mechanisms that we should all practice for a healthier being.
Yeah.
If you need help, go for help.
Yeah.
I have found that very helpful in my recovery as well.
Yeah, instead of having their pity party inside. When
I
I
think some
did,
professional is wonderful.
yes, yeah, we need that. We, especially since we talked about it, there's no real coping mechanism that's part of our culture. It's like, oh, come on, get past it, kind of a thing. But I know I wanted to ask you when I read it, you talked about the box getting smaller. Is
Mm.
that like your life, but like you're talking about that, like getting,
Yeah, my husband's diagnosis, which was January 15th, to his death, which was March 18th, was a very rapid decline. And I thought that if I could make him stronger, I could make him better, and that was unrealistic. And day by day, with his decline, the box of my world got smaller and smaller, to the point I went out to a yoga class one day when he was watching something on television. And when I got back, he was teary, and he was a very wonderful, virile, strong, healthy man. And he said, I got scared when you were gone. So from that point
oh,
on, I chose not to leave him anymore except when he was sleeping. So to walk the dog, to pick up some groceries, to get some air became a difficult task. And that's how the box, and then it's the psychological box. I was scared. I was trying to plan for a future. I had no idea what it would bring. I was 59 years old. My husband was always prided himself on taking care of a strong woman. And a lot of things I didn't know, including our finances and several other things. And
yeah.
I had to learn them. And that box was closing in on me, and I didn't know what I needed to know. And I didn't have all the coping skills until I did.
So like this
I was
is,
ashamed of that after his death. I was embarrassed by that. And then I learned not to be, that
yeah.
it's okay.
I mean, that's like pre-death, and of course, with David, it was so fast. But if you're giving counsel or that personal advice to someone before someone's passing, I mean, it's almost like you have a little luxury when you know it's going to happen. We had that with some family members, but I
Mhm.
always say, as a caregiver, you have to be very good to yourself. But even that's not true. I mean, we have very aggressive means to keep people alive. We keep saying, fight it, but maybe people don't want to fight it. Maybe it's time to just
Well, when
accept.
you read my book, the foreword of my book was written by Dr. Sean Morrison, head of palliative care for Mount Sinai. The man was an angel in my life. Dr. Morrison taught us how to cope, taught us what to look for, taught us what to expect, taught us how to handle fear. And then, of course, we were turned over to hospice, which are equally angels. People should not be afraid of palliative care and hospice. They are wonderful tools in assisting. I also speak about laying in Michael's arms almost every night at sunset. The safest place in the world for me were his arms, where I knew that the world wouldn't get me. And we would talk. We would talk about our love. We would talk about the children. We would talk about their accomplishments, our friends, what we meant to each other. And we had a lot of closure that way. A
Wow,
lot of closure.
that's a
I
love.
also let his friends and family come while he was ill. And sometimes he fought me a little bit to see him, to talk to him, to lie in bed with him and laugh, because
Yeah.
I wanted them to have closure too. Death is difficult. And he was an extraordinary man, and death of an extraordinary young man is particularly difficult.
I know. Well, two things I wanted to ask. One, I really appreciate, I've heard this line before, but it's in your book when you say, you can be called a widow, a widower, whatever, but there's no moniker for the loss of a child.
No language is cruel enough to come
Yeah.
up with a word. No language could possibly come up with a word as cruel as losing a child, as what that position is. No, there's a hole in your heart that will never heal.
Yeah.
My losing a child, David, and losing a husband are completely different in so many different ways. But the one thing is, you can love again. You can partially fill the void of a spouse. There is no filling the void of a child. However, it was last August when I was sitting at Hampton Coffee with my daughter in a beautiful ritual of getting coffee in the morning, when it was David's 5th anniversary of his death, that she looked at me with a cocked head and said, "Mommy, I'm pregnant." And thus became the last chapter of my book, and how I knew my book would end. And that was with the birth of Madeline Elliott, my granddaughter, which
Oh,
continued the life cycle, named for my husband, Michael, and my son's middle name was Elliott. And she has brought such joy and such continuation of life to our family that it is possible to smile again, to know that life will continue.
I think there's no coincidences like that, so to have that gift be given to you, at such a
It is a gift, the
like
greatest gift.
milestone. What was your husband's pet name for you? You talked.
I can't divulge that. That's so funny because I reference it many times in the
I
book.
know.
And the comment, if you know, you know. So many of my friends and family know, because he never called me Susan in our entire married life. And he would yell this name in public, in meetings, and it's I can't divulge it. If you know, you know. If you want to have a conversation with me as a sidebar, I will tell you it, because it requires an explanation. But it was so endearing, and it was all he ever called me. And to this day, if I hear him in my head refer to me, that's how he refers to me.
That's
You're the only person that's ever picked up on that.
Oh, you're kidding. Oh no, I was going to ask you right off the bat, but I didn't want to alarm anyone. But because I'm curious, and also because I think terms of endearment mean so much, and it's very, very, very special like
I will
that.
tell you on sidebar what it was.
Okay, I think that's the start of your next book, because in
Maybe.
my grandfather's family, nobody had a nickname. Like, you couldn't do that. Everyone's name was their full name. But I love nickname. My father called me Duchess,
Mhm.
and I
We
just
see why.
yeah. And I love it. At one point, I thought I was getting too big for such a baby name, but now I really embrace it. And
I think that was a self-fulfilling prophecy, actually.
right, right, it goes with me. So you have to go with the crowns and different things.
Correct.
Thank you for noticing that. So so a couple of things. I can't believe the time is going, but what do you think is so empowering about the grieving process that you're imparting to your?
I will tell you, it's choices and the do-over. That you actually have a chance to grow, to introspect, to find out who you are, when it's a time in your life you didn't think you were going to be asking that question. I also think it's a time, and it particularly as a widow or widower, which I'm addressing more so in this, is that finding out that your best friend better be you, and that closing the door and being happy with who you're with is a really important place to be in your life. And if you can achieve that, it is extraordinary.
Do you
And then
feel
that,
like doing it for them, like you owe it to them, or like it's more for
I
yourself?
think you owe it to yourself.
Mm.
And that is, you've endured, you've loved, you've lost. Now honor the most important person in your life, and that would be you. And that's not saying that you don't want to be a companion, you don't want to be a husband or wife again, you don't want to be a boyfriend or girlfriend. It just means that you start to recognize the power in yourself, that you have choices, you designate your path, you can be who you want to be, and you can grow at any age. And that growth for me has been life-changing.
I'm going to ask you something, and it's a little dodgy in some ways, but it's part of my doula training too. I can't help but I recognize that a lot of the prism that I see death or, people going through grieving is through the prism of a very, I'll say, advantageous or beneficial life. And so we can indulge in a certain kind of grieving because we're well off and we have the wherewithal to be able to make these journeys and explorations. But do you think for people who just don't have the time, they just got to get back to work or have other, young children to take care of, or maybe it was a war and, whatever kind of grieving that there is, that there's not that support network. And so how do you address those kinds of people that are less fortunate?
Okay, those are two different animals. A support network and not having resources are two different animals. So for people who don't have a support network, that is the hardest. But a support network has nothing to do with resources. Having an extended family, having people that care about you, being a good friend and having good friends has nothing to do with your station in life. And I think that that is a cultivation and something that people need to recognize. I have found with the birth of my granddaughter, because my daughter did her maternity leave with me out here, that it takes a village.
Yeah.
And that the beauty of being the grandmother and the mother to the daughter of a child is wonderful. And it's almost envious of the cultures where the grandmother, the mother, and the daughter live together and co-parent and raise a child as a village. So I don't think that's resource-based. I think that's just appreciating that no man is an island. In fact, I'll go as far as to say that in current upwardly mobile society, where children have the wherewithal to say, I'm going to move to California. My family's in New York, but I want to live in San Francisco. And then they get there and there's no support system.
Right.
I think it is probably a better support system in people where the resources aren't as huge to make them as mobile. So I'm going to say that it takes a village and that one needs to embrace one's family and know that they lost as deeply as you did, no matter what the loss is, respect their loss, mourn together, and then grow out of it together. Help
That's
each other.
I think that's very good advice for, anyone that
As
feels.
far as resources go, discovering who you are and what you can become has nothing to do with resources. If you want to make exercise your goal, you don't have to go to Soul Cycle every day. You can speed walk in the park. If you want to be a better person, and that includes charity work, it's available to everyone. If you want to work harder and attain greater goals in your job, no matter what your job is, no matter what level it is, to be self-improved, you can do it. It is not a resource-based recovery. Grief is not a resource-based recovery.
I think that is very solid advice for anyone that feels like they just can't indulge. You have to. You've been going on your book tour now and doing some talks and things. Is there anything about that has surprised you, or that people have asked you that you didn't expect?
The thing that I've been most overwhelmed, I did a talk last night out here. The thing that I've been most overwhelmed about is the reception of my book and how people relate to it and how kind they are. It has been overwhelming. I have pages and pages of emails and messages and texts from people that I don't even know that were told to buy the book from a friend of a friend, who have said that this has made a marked difference on their life. And when I was asked, what do I want from this? Firstly, when I wrote the book, I wanted it to be published. I wanted to be a published author. But that morphed into, if a tree falls in a forest and it doesn't make any noise, was it heard? So if a book is written and it doesn't get read, is there any impact? I want to get this book read. I want to get my message out there. I want people to hear me read it because it's my heart and soul, and I think I can really help.
Yes.
That's my goal. That's the purpose. And the reception, the extraordinary reception of my work You know, I said to write a memoir, I'm not a public person. To write a memoir was stripping myself naked and marching up Broadway. To publish a memoir is to stay naked and walk back. It's hard. It's
Yes.
hard, and it's raw, and it's helping. And I want to get my word out there. I want to read this. I want to tell people to read it, and I'll be there for them.
And that is so selfless, again, to be able to help
Thank
people,
you. But
Susan, which is
I
wonderful.
like people.
I encourage, all of you that are watching or sharing this, later on, that with
Yeah,
folks, but
we
maybe
both have. There it is.
they
That's what I,
yeah, that they can ask Susan to be a part of your book club. That
I
she,
would love that.
yeah,
Organizations I can speak to,
yeah,
religious affiliations, JCCs, YMCAs, I am there for you. Bookstores, I'm there for you. I would love to do a reading for you all.
yeah. I know there's so many book clubs, and this is perfect for it. My books are a little bit different, but this
Hmm.
one, people can read together, and then you could, do an online,
Be
read
wonderful.
them and talk, so you can, reach out to Susan. So this is Susan's Instagram, and you all have my Instagram, and
Please follow me. I do keep things about the book current. So please follow.
exactly. And so if they can tag you, maybe you can win an autograph copy that Susan's going to
Correct.
do. So I'll be able to pick that name, from those of you who, you know, see this and then embrace it. So it is really a marvelous book. I've read some of it and I look forward to reading the rest of it. I think this is such salient information for all of us. And I think even if you haven't lost someone, it helps you prepare for it, because when people say to me, how could you be a death doula or end of life trainer? And I say, because I love life so much. And I think
Correct.
that this helps you prepare for it. And in so many ways, you're helping us to
You're
prepare.
doing good work. Good work.
Yeah. So before we go, because I can't believe it's time to go already, but any parting thoughts that you would have?
Any parting thoughts? Just try to believe in yourself. Try to live your best life. Always remember that those people that you lost are with you spiritually, in your mind. Some people say physically, but make choices that are good and try to be the best you can, and wake up happy.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Now, I don't know that I told you this, Susan, but I ask each of the ladies who lunch guess what their favorite cocktail is, and then I render it in a watercolor for a cocktail napkin and sell it, and then the proceeds go to your charity, whatever
Okay.
that is. But I'm going to ask, what's your favorite cocktail?
I am a red wine drinker.
I was told no cocktails, just red wine.
Is that okay? I could come up with something else if you wanted me to.
Well, if you think about it, you can go. I mean, I wrote the art of the garnish, so I think of cocktails. But red wine is terrific. I'm a
I,
late.
I am a Cabernet drinker.
Okay, Cabernet it is. I love it. Well, I'm drinking my champagne to salute to you, and
Thank you so much.
yes, and for spending the time with us and imparting your very, very personal story. It is very touching, to say the least, but it's also very life affirming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and letting me give my message. Thank you so much.
All right, bye, Susan.
Bye bye
Take
now.
enjoy.
Thank you. You too.